Okay guys, today we are talking fire management. Fire management is what separates a pitmaster from maybe just a great cook. Your ability to manipulate the fire and get it to do what you need it to, when you need it to do it, is going to be the difference between making good barbecue and great barbecue. Today I'm going to break down a few techniques that are going to be helpful to you when you're doing your next offset cook. We're going to go over how to get the right heat, how to get the right smoke, and ultimately how to get the right results. The first thing we got to talk about is fuel size. Now, you wouldn't burn this split in the same smoker where you would burn this. These are two different size pieces of wood for two different size smokers. This is a great size for the pit behind me. This is a typical backyard size smoker. This is the Franklin barbecue pit. This is 8 to 10 inches long, about 2 inches in diameter. This one's probably 3 inches by 1 inch. So an average of somewhere around 2 inches in diameter is a good rule of thumb for you. Now, if you go a little bit bigger, you're gonna struggle with the fire. If you go smaller, you're gonna struggle with the fire, but this is a good size. If your pit is an intermediate size, say somewhere between 120 gallons and 250 gallons, this would be an appropriate size. This is maybe 14 inches long and an average diameter of 2 to 3 inches. This will work really well. It'll provide long, low sustained heat, and it's not gonna go nuclear hot and then fade into nothing like a split that's too small, because they'll flare up immediately and then burn down, not leave you any coals, and you're left fighting with the fire the whole time. So the first thing you have to do for adequate fire management is proper wood selection. And you want your wood to be dry enough. So a typical rule of thumb is 18 to 20% moisture is gonna give you good flavor along with long sustained heat. It's not gonna be like kiln dried wood, which is gonna go up like tinder, but not really give you the kind of flavor that you're after. And one way to check the wood is to actually split it in half and check the center. Because a lot of times you can check the outside of the wood, it says, oh, it's 12% moisture. But if you split it and check the center, it'll say it's 36%. And that's why your wood isn't burning properly. So those are the first two things you need to look out for before you even worry about how you're building your fire. You have to check the wood moisture and the wood size to make sure it's appropriate for your smoker. Then one caveat before we jump into how we're actually gonna put these logs in a pattern that's gonna give us what we're after in terms of smoke and heat, we have to talk about the kind of wood that you're using. So some people think you must use post oak. That is the wood you have to use no matter where you are in the country. Post oak is the way. Well, post oak is a subcategory, or it's a sub-variety of white oak. And you know what post oak tastes like? Tastes like white oak. It just so happens that all these great barbecue restaurants in Central Texas, they have tons and tons and tons of post oak. So what do they burn for the barbecue in the restaurant? Post oak. So if you have white oak where you are, guess what? Totally fine. If you have red oak, guess what? Totally fine. If you have pecan, totally fine. Now, there are some woods that have different flavors. Fruit woods tend to have milder flavors. Pecan is a nice sweet flavor. It's my particular favorite wood. This is pecan that we have right here. And then when you have oaks of various kinds, they taste pretty similar. I'd be hard pressed to identify one from another. Hickory you can usually identify by a little bit spicier note in the smoke profile. And then the one that you do need to be very aware of is mesquite. Mesquite has a very, very strong flavor profile. It doesn't matter if you burn your fire crystal clear, clean the entire time. The flavor is so intense that it's gonna probably be too intense for you to even enjoy the barbecue that you make with it. But with all that being said, it's much more important how you build and run your fire than it is the specific variety of wood that you're using. So I would take somebody who knows what they're doing cooking over hickory any day of the week over somebody who's got post oak from the very same place that Aaron Franklin gets his post oak if they don't know what they're doing. So your knowledge as a pitmaster is far more important than the specific variety of wood that you have. Once you've adjusted the intake on the firebox to get the kind of smoke that you want, it's time to adjust the damper to get the right kind of airflow. There are two reasons we adjust the damper. The first is to get gentle airflow throughout the smoker, unless you're after that kind of jet engine, super hot, really fast airflow. The second reason to adjust the damper is to even out temperatures. Right now, from one end to the other of the smoker, we're getting about a 90-degree difference, which means that how things are cooking next to the firebox are going to be very different than how they're cooking next to the smokestack. And in order to even that out and give a consistent cooking environment from one end of the grate to the other, we have to use this damper on the stack to reduce the airflow and kind of fill the smoker with an even amount of heat. Right now, the heat leaves the firebox, goes up to the top of the chamber, moves across, and then finally out the stack, and you have just kind of a dead spot that's 70, 80, 90 degrees cooler than what's right next to the firebox. So if we close it down, we can kind of fill the whole chamber with heat and get even cooking. So I'm gonna adjust this damper and close it down about 50%, and we're gonna check the temperatures from one end to the other and see how close we can get them. So you can see after adjusting the damper down, we have more even temps from one end to the other, and we have slower, more turbulent air, which is going to be better for barbecue and bark formation. So I would encourage you to play with the damper, find out what works for you and gives you the results that you want. So let's get into some of the different configurations you can have for your wood as you're constructing your fires. So first we need to discuss what you're going to do when you're lighting your fire. This is where you're going to want maximum airflow, you're going to want maximum flame because you need it to catch, because you don't want to be fighting with your fire before it ever gets going. So the easiest way to do this, in my opinion, if you have a round firebox, that's actually a help to you because it slightly lifts the wood off of the bottom, giving you airflow underneath. And so the bottom pieces of wood can catch. If you just have a flat bottom to your firebox, then you're just going to need something to lift the next layer of wood logs off of the bottom so that they can get proper airflow. So a flat bottom firebox, what I would do is 2 pieces of roughly equal height on the bottom, then on top, go 3 wide. And I always turn the thicker part of a piece of wood toward the center. So if I have this chunk that's kind of triangular, the thicker side is toward the center, and then I'd go 3, and then I like to start with a big coal bed, so I use quite a bit of wood. I'd go 3 more on top, again, thicker part toward the middle, and that should burn really hot, get everything burned off that might be on the grates, and then you have a big coal bed for when you actually get your fire going. Now, if you have a round firebox, I would do the exact same thing, except because the ones on the bottom, these 2 logs will actually burn because they're lifted off from the bottom of the firebox, I would go 3 on the bottom as well. So a total of 9, that should get you plenty of coals to get started. So this is the lattice structure that's going to be maximum airflow, maximum heat, maximum efficiency. So it's not great for producing smoke flavor, but it's great for producing heat. If you're after smoke flavor, this isn't the right configuration. One caveat for that is if your wood is a little too green, then you're going to have to work and make sure you get enough airflow for it to burn, and you are still going to produce smoke. So we're going to talk later about the different smoke levels, 1, 2, and 3, and how to achieve those. Generally speaking, this lattice structure will give you a smoke level 0 or 1, depending on how you're running the intake to your firebox or the door to your firebox. If you're letting lots of oxygen in, you're getting very little smoke flavor. If you're kind of restricting the oxygen, you can get more smoke flavor. But again, it depends on how green your wood is. If your wood is nice and seasoned, this is not how I would recommend burning a wood fire for maximum flavor. So to construct a Goldie-style fire, you put 3 logs on the bottom. These are called base logs. They're there to provide low sustained heat and a lot of smoke flavor. So the 3 on the bottom, if you're going after more heat, you can separate them a little bit so you have flames licking up in between the logs and you get more heat and a little bit less smoke. If you're going after more smoke flavor, you can squeeze them together and it kind of functions as one big log on the bottom, but it's right next to those coals, so it's going to be burning at a high temperature but not producing a whole lot of flame just because there's not very much oxygen present. The next layer of logs you can think of as heat logs, because these logs on the bottom are mainly for smoke and they do provide low sustained heat, but the logs that sit on top are going to be an open flame. They're going to produce a lot of heat. So 1 log for low heat, 2 logs for medium heat, and then 3 logs for high heat. You can of course keep adding logs if you're trying to get even hotter, but usually this works for most people smokers if you have an appropriate sized piece of wood to start off with. Another thing to note is the way they do it there is they will break these down into coals once it's kind of run its course. So they'll build fires successively. They're not continually adding logs. There are some restaurants where they kind of continually add logs to maintain the same temperature. But with Goldies, they're restricting airflow into the firebox, and that is the limiting reactant in terms of producing heat. So what's limiting how much heat is coming through the firebox into the cook chamber is how much oxygen they're letting into the firebox. So The wood, there's plenty of wood. There's more than enough wood. You can think of it this way. If I give you 1 million pieces of bread and 2 million pieces of lettuce and 10 million pieces of tomato, but I give you 1 piece of ham, how many ham sandwiches can you make? You can make only 1 ham sandwich, okay? So in this case, what is like the piece of ham that limits how many sandwiches you can make? The oxygen limits how hot this fire can burn and how much heat it can make. So it will continue to run at a steady temperature until the logs are basically burned down into coals. At that point, they kind of crush them up and then spread the coals out and rebuild a fire. So they're thinking not in terms of adding a log, adding a log, adding a log. It's, I build a fire. When that one's run its course, I build a new fire. When that one's run its course, I build another one. And you just have to find out what works best for you according to the wood you have and the smoker you have. For them, it obviously works extremely well. I would consider trying it if you're searching for more smoke flavor. The next fire style I want to talk about is one that uses relatively green wood, but they burn a clean fire because green wood plus a clean fire equals a smoky flavor. Whereas if you have kiln-dried wood and you're burning a clean fire, there's almost no flavor at all. If you have ever had food cooked on a pellet smoker where the pellets didn't really provide much flavor, it's kind of like that sensation when you take a bite. So with green wood, you can burn what would be a much cleaner fire, but still produce flavor. So what a lot of people will do is they'll have kind of a channel in the middle where they'll have coals, they'll have a log on either side to raise the next set of logs up above those coals so that they burn in open flame and produce heat. And they burn what would be relatively clean, but like I said, the green wood makes it nice and smoky. So you have 2 logs beside each other, and then for heat, you can add logs, as many as are necessary. On most smokers, 2 or 3 above that is pretty good. Whereas if you just had 3 on the bottom of the firebox, you wouldn't produce that much heat, but you'd produce a lot more smoke. The next fire style I want to talk to you about is called a bundle fire. At least that's what I've heard it called. And if the wood that you're using is a little too thin, or if it's kiln dried and you're really working hard to produce smoke rapidly, you can build a bundle fire. Essentially, you're doing everything you can to limit oxygen flow and produce smoke and smoky flavor. So this might be if you have a really short cook, like you're doing turkeys and you want extra smoky at the beginning, or if you're doing chicken and you want extra smoky, or even ribs and you're trying to get a lot of smoke right at the beginning before you ramp up temperatures. The bundle fire is exactly what it sounds like. You put them right next to each other, not much room for oxygen, and you just stack them, and it looks something like this, and it's gonna sit there and produce lots of smoke. Now, the one thing you need to know about the difference between bad tasting smoke and good tasting smoke isn't what I thought for a long time. For a long time, I thought if you see any smoke coming out of the smokestack, you've made a grave error, and this is the end of the world. You have to move heaven and earth to change what you're doing with the fire so you don't see any smoke. I've learned that that's not actually quite true. It's totally fine to see smoke. As a matter of fact, I think it's helpful most of the time to see smoke. It's totally fine to see smoke, as a matter of fact. It's beneficial because you're trying to flavor the meat with smoke, and unless you're producing enough of those compounds, you're not going to get the richness of smoke flavor that you're really after. The big line of difference between good flavor and bad flavor is whether or not you're burning an open flame in the firebox. So if you're just smoldering away, that can oftentimes taste bitter. It's not very good, and it can taste good for a little bit, then eventually it just wears on you and it's just not as good as you thought it was with the first bite. If you're burning an open flame the whole time, what you get is a very rich, robust smoke flavor. And so the system that I've come up with is not very creative, but it is useful. I use the numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3 to describe the level of smoke flavor that's being added. 0 is burning a crystal clear fire, so what you see out of the smokestack just looks like a mirage. It's just waves of heat. And that is very little smoke flavor, but you're burning the wood extremely efficiently. This is something that you would use at the end of a cook when everything's wrapped and you don't need any more smoke flavor on there. All you're trying to do is burn an efficient fire to get those things finished off. Smoke level 1 is burning a fire where it could be because the wood is green or you're restricting oxygen a little bit, but you're seeing some light blue smoke that's coming out of the smokestack. This is a mild flavoring of the smoke. It's not super rich or robust. It's good. You will like the flavor. You're gonna just wish that you had a little bit more. This might be something that will happen from time to time while you're doing a long cook like brisket or beef ribs or pork butt. This isn't something that I typically shoot for, but it's something that occurs in the process. If you don't like a really robust smoke flavor and you want to dial it back, a smoke level 1 might be the right answer for you. Smoke level 2 is when you're burning a fire and you're producing a fair amount of smoke. So it's not just thick billowing plumes of smoke, but it's definitely there. You can definitely see it. It's not just a thin blue smoke that you may have heard about, but you're still burning an open flame in the firebox. And in my experience, for any fire style that you have, you never want huge flames unless you're trying to get something nuclear jet engine hot, like you're searing a roast or something like that. What you want is short flames. Whether you have a 1,000-gallon pit or a Franklin pit like the one behind me, short flames are good. So one thing that I use to describe a very, very smoky smoke that if it were any dirtier would be too dirty is smoke level 2.5. And this is the maximum restriction of oxygen that you can do without killing all the flames in the firebox. So you might have little bitty tiny flames on the wood and you're producing lots and lots of smoke. That's okay. That's something that I would use if I'm smoking chicken or turkey or sausage or the beginning of a rib cook, just to lay on a lot of smoke flavor. But if you smother out the fire, you're going to get some of those off flavors that you probably want to avoid. And that's associated with smoke level 3. That's simply smoldering smoke, something you might get in a Weber Smoky Mountain, where the wood is hot enough to give off volatile compounds, that is smoke, but it's not hot enough to burn in open flame. That's going to produce that rich variety of compounds that makes it worthwhile to cook with an offset smoker. The whole reason I use offset smokers isn't just because I like to punish myself and sweat and manage a fire and deal with wood guys. Wood guys are the worst people in the world, by the way. They're like worse than used car salesmen. If they say it's about a cord, it's never about a cord. If they say it's bone dry, assume that it's 40% moisture. It's just a word for the wise out there. So just be prepared and maybe check out what they have before giving them a stack of cash to drop it off, because they always only take cash. I understand. I don't begrudge them for not wanting to pay taxes, but I use this for my business and I would like to make it a business expense. Anyway, all that aside, what you need is open flame to produce good flavor. Smoldering smoke is only useful, in my opinion, if you're cold smoking something. Smoke level 3, in my opinion at least, is only really useful or really preferable when you're cold smoking something like cheese or salmon. Say you have a fillet of salmon and you've cured it and you want to cold smoke it. You're going to make your own lox, which is delicious, by the way. If you've never done it, please do it. That is a smoke level 3 environment. You're trying to keep it as cool as possible so you don't coagulate those proteins and change the texture of the salmon, but you're laying on smoke flavor. In my experience, you only really get those weird off flavors of smoke at higher temperatures that you're cooking at. So if you're cooking at 200 and you have smoke level 3 where it's just smoldering fire, then those off flavors start to build up. For some reason that I don't quite understand, if you're doing cold smoking and the protein that you're smoking is, say, 50 degrees, you don't pick up any of those off flavors. So those are the 3 varieties of smoke flavor. If you include 0 and 2.5, it's 5 in total. But it's a good guideline for how you need to think about doing your cooks. At the beginning of cooks, I almost always recommend start with like a smoke level 2, where you're burning an open flame, you're restricting the oxygen, or your wood is green, you're producing a significant amount of smoke, but you still have open flame in the firebox. Then smoke level 1 could be you're pushing for more heat now. Say you want to get pull back on the bone on some ribs that you're cooking, or you're trying to get a little bit more airflow, get some barking up of what you're cooking. That's a useful tool in your arsenal as well. But with those 3 smoke profiles, you can get pretty much any kind of protein, the smoke flavor that it needs, so it can really shine and be at its best. After all of that description of how we're gonna, manipulate these logs to get the flavor and heat that we want, let's talk about the other 2 inputs you have when it comes to running your offset smoker. The first is the firebox door or a vent to let air into the firebox. The second is the damper on the stack. They are related. One does affect the other, but I think it's most helpful to think of them as performing 2 separate but very valuable functions. If you think about the firebox door letting oxygen in as the regulator for the kind of flavor that you're producing, that will allow you to dial it into exactly what you want. On most smokers, you just crack the firebox door and you'll have enough air to burn a smoky but still open flame fire that's going to produce a really rich flavor that you're after. It's what separates offset smokers from every other kind of cooker on the market, and I will fight you if you disagree with me on that. But that firebox door, you can use that to dial in smoke level 0, 1, 2, 2.5, 3. For further clarification, smoke level 2.5 is basically the same as smoke level 2, except you have even more fuel in there, producing even more smoke, and you just have those small flames. But if you put in too much fuel, there's no way for you to choke off enough of the oxygen without the fire dying, and then you're at smoke level 3 producing off flavors. So the manipulation of that firebox door is going to dial in flavor for you. Now the stack is going to help you dial in heat management. So if you have the stack wide open, then the hot gases from the firebox go up to the top of the cook chamber, they kind of travel over to the stack end and go out, and you have kind of a worsening dead spot across the grate. So you might have big differences between one side of the grate and the other side. By dampening down the stack, you slow the airflow, and you can kind of think of it as filling the whole cook chamber with that hot air, and you even out the temperatures, and perhaps even more importantly, you reduce the airflow. So a slower airflow is going to be a gentler cook, and you're going to have more turbulence. You're going to lay on more bark, more smoke flavor. There's enough time for the smoke in the cook chamber to flavor the meat before it exits through the stack. So manipulating the stack is good for temperature control. Manipulating the firebox door is good for flavor control. And then the amount of fuel you use is going to be kind of like the baseline temperature. So if you use too much fuel, you're going to be fighting to pull it back. If you don't use enough fuel, you're going to be fighting to maintain temperature while still producing smoke flavor. There are a lot of nuances, and there's no replacement for spending a lot of time next to a fire and figuring out what it does in your cooker. But I've spent thousands of hours next to a fire, and I'm hoping that this is a distillation of that experience that makes it easier for you to get the results that you're after. There are myriad other issues that can come up while running a fire for an offset smoker. I can't possibly cover them all here, but I think this is probably 98% of the issues that you'll have come up. There are a few one-offs that we're all going to encounter from time to time, like what if your wood has been rained on, or what if there's dirt on your wood, or what if, fill in the blank. But this is a good guideline for you to hopefully have a lot of success. And if you're using these techniques, please tag us, let us know. And we want to check out what you guys are doing. Maybe we'll learn some stuff too. That's the best for us. But with all of this fire hose of information, let's go build a fire in the Franklin pit. This pit, though it's very easy to run, doesn't have any kind of way to completely restrict airflow on the firebox, and it's got no damper for the stack. So your skills in manipulating the logs in the firebox are going to be critically important to achieve the smoke flavor and the temperature that you want. All right, I got 4 logs here. We're going to build a Goldie-style fire. That is 3 base logs. We're going to have them almost touching because I want to produce a significant amount of smoke flavor. We're going to have 1 heat log on top that's going to be burning an open flame. And because we can't really restrict the airflow into the firebox too much, we might have to keep an eye on it. And if it's burning too hot, we'll have to take this one out and just focus on keeping those base logs for a consistent heat and consistent smoke flavor. But let's go do it. With fire management, there's science and art to it, and then a little bit of instinct. And the more you do it, the better you're going to become at doing it. The best way to become a pit master is to get out there and build fires and run cooks, and you're going to learn quickly. I think if you reference this, it's going to be a good touchstone for you. Oh, wait, maybe if I'm getting this result and I don't like it this way, I can try this instead. So it's my best attempt to distill all the hours I spent watching fires for you, the viewers, to have better experiences with cooking. If you guys are using these techniques, please tag me at Mad Scientist BBQ and Embers TV, because I want to see what you guys are doing. It's always awesome to see you guys post stuff and see the work that I put in trying to teach what I've learned about barbecue paying off for you and the people you care about. So thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you in the next episode.